Hey guys, what's going on? It's Eli, and with my dad, of course, Little Blue, and yes, of course, continuing on reviewing Halloweenish films on the weekdays. And for this one, with my dad, that's right guys, you read the title, and you know what we're reviewing. And seeing as how, it's another Halloweenish film that's celebrating its anniversary this year, we are in fact reviewing Twilight Zone, the movie. Yes, so what are the first things we have to say about the Twilight Zone movie? I mean, first off, it had been quite a while since there had been any Twilight Zone material. You know, ever since the original Twilight Zone, the Twilight Zone came to an end, got canceled in, the 60s, and then Rod Serling, he would go on to make The Night Gallery. And then a decade after Night Gallery, and a decade after Rod Serling sadly passed away, well, Warner Brothers and four acclaimed directors, John Landis, Steven Spielberg, Joe Dante, and George Miller, all came together and brought us a film of the Twilight Zone. And even after this, more Twilight Zone materials would come after the movie. Mm-hmm. So again, the first things we have to say about the Twilight Zone movie?
Well, it was stories that were reimagined from the original Twilight Zone.
Except for one, that was original.
Mm-hmm. You had Terror at 20,000 Feet, which was...
Nightmare at 20,000 feet.
I'm sorry, Nightmare at 20,000 feet. Which,
Terror.
Terror, it was Terror at 20,000 feet, but it was, the proper title was, you're right, Nightmare at 20,000 feet.
Yeah.
That William Shatner, of course, starred in.
Mm-hmm.
Which was brilliantly done.
Yeah, there was also Kick the Can, and It's a Good Life.
Yep. Kick the Can, in this case, was Scatman Crothers.
Yep.
And, of course, John Lithgow portrayed the lead, where Shatner portrayed the lead in the original from the TV series.
Yep. And the very first one in the film, that's original for the movie, which being it was the Time Out. Yeah, that's the name of the first segment. Yeah.
Yes.
But first off, I'll go ahead and read the description / the story. 4 horror and science fiction segments directed by 4 famous directors, each of them being a new version of a classic story from Rod Serling's landmark television series. That's pretty much all there is to know.
Right. Take that back. I want to see
okay.
that. I want to see.
As
that.
always, we've got the tablet.
Yeah, stop
so.
it. Right there.
All right.
Okay. That's what I wanted to see. The gremlin. Everybody laughs at in a way. When you watch that original episode,
even as of today,
Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, it's sort of laughable because you really got a sort of what looks like the guy's wearing a fursuit, whoever is wearing
looks like a stuffed bear,
or some kind of a teddy bear, but the face is hideous.
Yeah,
they did a good job with the face. I will say that
we did talk about this at one point. That obviously back when Nightmare 20,000 Feet came out, audience were terrified of the gremlin, the sight of the gremlin.
The gremlin is quite scary looking.
Even the gremlin in this,
the gremlin in this is very scary, and just kind of slimy looking, And he's even when he touches when John Lithgow is hanging out the window,
it's kind of like
and the guy and it grabs his face. It looks like
he kind of leaves like
some kind of a residue, like a brownish slimy stuff on his face.
That's the word I was thinking of. He leaves like gooey slimy on his face.
But the funny part is the part that I absolutely loved is when the gremlin does that. He pushes his face back, and then he goes like that and smiles like,
you didn't get me.
You're not going to catch me.
No.
And even when he shoots him, like in the original episode with William Shatner fires several shots and kills the gremlin. And the gremlin falls to its death, wherever it fell to.
Yeah.
Imagine some poor schmuck in their house and the thing comes through the roof, and lands in their bathtub or something. Yeah. Or lands in their living room.
Yeah, but more on Nightmare 20,000 Feet later on because, of course, we got to start in order. The prologue, which has Dan Aykroyd and Albert Brooks.
Which is hilarious.
They're credited as... Albert Brooks is credited as the car driver. Dan Aykroyd is credited as the passenger. And, it had a pretty good, I think the Twilight Zone movie had a pretty good song, and that was included in this, Midnight Special.
Yeah, by Creedence Clearwater Revival,
Yeah.
which was a classic rock song, and
And they're singing it on the road, and
exactly.
at one point the tape kind of gets
messes up.
Yeah.
He pulls it out, which
and even though it's
happened to
brand,
everybody
even
who
though it's
lived in
brand
that era.
new,
Yeah, and he's they're singing and they're having a good time. They're messing around, just driving on this desert highway. They're out in the desert driving.
no other drivers are out in the road.
And nobody's out there. It's desolate. It's dark. It's it's lonely. And you think you're going to see a flying saucer come down. That's what you're expecting, but you don't. What ends up happening is, of course, Dan Aykroyd. They're messing with each other.
And then
says, "You want to see something really scary?"
Well, I mean, they first start like guessing what's theme songs they're singing. I think
exactly. They're playing. Guess the name of the song.
Yeah.
Theme songs from TV shows.
And then Dan Aykroyd brings up, did you ever watch The Twilight Zone?
Exactly.
And they start talking about some episodes from The Twilight Zone, like, of course, Time Enough at Last. And how Albert Brooks' character says, he bought another pair of glasses because he was terrified of that episode. His character says that. And yeah, because when Dan Aykroyd tells him, you want to see something really scary? Pull over, turns over, and then we see a hideous creature.
Yeah, it's pretty hideous. I mean, it's when you first see it, you're kind of taken aback by it because it's really hideous looking.
And since they mentioned Time Enough at Last and Burgess Meredith, the fact being Burgess Meredith does the narration in the Twilight Zone movie. Yep.
Exactly.
And the intro, and the movie redoing the intro to the Twilight Zone, as we all know. And then the first segment, Time Out. William Connor, being played by the late legendary Vic Morrow, a Sorrow man, and he didn't get the job he wanted or something like that.
Very racist, very prejudiced.
Exactly.
Against other races, against
yeah, because as he says, because of the Jews, because of the blacks.
He just
living 6 blocks down my house, 6 blocks,
and he's really he's making his friends very uncomfortable. He is just so negative and so. But then he gets his comeuppance.
Yeah. Larry and Ray, his friends, being played by Doug McGrath and Charles Hallinan, I don't know if I'm saying the last name right there. So
Charles Hallahan.
Okay, yeah.
And I've seen him act in it.
And then there is a couple of black people there, and at least one of them takes it easy,
they're offended, but he calls him out, which he should have,
And he handles it well, just
he
doesn't.
But he used restraint. I'll say that. But it was just one of those things.
And then the black guy says, how about please hold it down? How about please hold it this? And then he just. Then Bill Connor, as he's credited, but still William Connor, he storms out of the bar, and when he gets out, he steps outside. He's in a different place now,
Yeah.
He basically he gets a taste of his own medicine, right?
He did get a dose of his own medicine, and and it's sad that Vic Morrow in this movie was actually killed in one scene.
Until we get to that, so
it was a very tragic accident.
And in this segment, Time Out, because Bill Connor gets a taste of his own medicine, there are Nazis, and
he's in Vietnam, and there's the soldiers are shooting at him.
Yep.
And
Jews, I think, and
they take him as someone of Jewish faith.
Okay, yeah, the Nazis, I think.
The Nazis take him and think he's Jewish.
Yeah.
And they put him on the train to take him to a concentration camp. And he's basically being forced to live through the Twilight Zone all of his prejudices, and it's basically teaching him a lesson for eternity.
Yeah.
To say, hey, these people have been oppressed, and then he's lynched. Literally, he's in some southern town in the 50s or 60s when they would attack black people, just for their color, and accuse them of everything because they were hated. I go back and I still say this, that someday historians are going to look back on the 20th century, the mid 20th century, sort of late 20th century, in the late 1960s, when there was so much racism, there was so much segregation, where black people had to go to different schools. There were water fountains that only black people could use, bathrooms, but yet we were sending men to the moon.
Yeah.
Somebody explain that to me, how we have that kind of intelligence and at the same time have that kind of stupidity in this world. It does not, I can't square that in my mind.
Yeah.
And someday historians are going to look back on that and say, yeah, they went to the moon and they set foot on the moon in 1969, but yet they had segregated schools, they had segregated bathrooms, restaurants, everything else. It was ludicrous.
Yeah, it was. It most certainly was,
Because of somebody's skin color is different than another.
Yeah.
It's extraordinary to me.
It is extraordinary. And, so with everything that's going on in Time Out, which, by the way, even though it is original, it's loosely based off of an episode of the original Twilight Zone.
Yes.
I wish I could remember the name of the episode, but the best I can describe is, well, Leonard Nimoy was one of the cast members in it, although he doesn't play the main character. The main character, he's an American soldier, and we were talking about this, like, it does take place, obviously, in World War II, and these soldiers are fighting against the Japanese, and the American soldier switches places. He switches, bodies. So he then goes, he's now there's a moment where he's now the Japanese soldier. So again, that's, the second Time Out is loosely based off of that episode. And by the way, because, as you pointed out, and hey, this can't be ignored, but Twilight Zone, the movie, being Vic Morrow's last ever film, again, because he was accidentally, tragically killed.
He was. I mean, he and a child. Actually.
Two children.
Two children. They were.
Here's the thing. I read this, that Vic Morrow was happy to be cast in the Twilight Zone movie because at that time he was doing B movies and not making a good success of his career. Yeah. And he was happy to be cast in the Twilight Zone movie because he hoped that it would make him, he would have a comeback into big time movies,
Yeah.
I'll tell you that, and I learned this, that the ending that we got in the Twilight Zone movie, I think, that's what it at first it originally was supposed to be. But then Warner Brothers stepped in, and they requested to shoot an alternate ending for the character of Bill Connor, for him to be redeemed. And that explains, and thus, with Bill Connor saving two Japanese, Asian kids, I should say, and with that helicopter, firing down on them, so... Yeah. Yeah. So again, the people at the time running Warner Brothers, that was on them. So
I agree with that.
Because they, again, as I'm explaining, they requested for there to be an alternate ending, again, to redeem Bill Connor's character. And, had nothing had gone wrong shooting that, then if they had gone with that alternate ending, then but the ending that we got, because that's what John Landis always intended it for to be. And let's face it, here's a good fun fact. Not every main character in a story / episode of The Twilight Zone gets a happy ending. No. There's a good chunk of episodes of The Twilight Zone where there's no happy ending.
Yeah.
Burgess Meredith's character in Time Enough at Last didn't get a happy ending. The neighbors of
the Monsters Are Due on Maple Street,
they didn't get a happy ending.
No.
There was even, do you remember that there's an episode of The Twilight Zone called Jungle?
Yes.
And the guy, he starts, the jungle comes to him and where he lives, and then a lion shows up. The lion kills his wife and then goes after him. He doesn't get a happy ending.
No.
No, again, there are a good chunk of Twilight Zone episodes where no one gets a happy ending. And thus, in Time Out, the character of Bill Connor, he doesn't get a happy ending. No. He gets taken away by the train, the Nazi train. So,
exactly.
Yeah, so there's that.
And he's yelling for help, and nobody's going to help him.
Well, yeah, that's the thing, because at the very end of that segment, he sees Ray and Larry trying to shout out for him, "It's me, it's me!" But of course, they don't see him.
No, they don't, because he's in another dimension, basically.
Exactly. Well, yeah, and thus, in the Twilight Zone.
He's allowed to see them, but they can't see him.
Exactly. There you go. But for the segment Time Out, it was pretty decent, don't you think? Like,
It was dark, very dark.
It was
but
dark.
But it was a good episode.
absolutely.
It made you think. It should make anybody think.
Yep. And again, like, like, who really knows, like, whose fault it was, what happened? Like, John Landis, or again, the people at the time running Warner Brothers. It's hard to tell, so.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, so for the second segment, Kick the Can, like, yeah. So now we come to the three segments where they are, like, new adaptations of episodes, taken straight from the episode.
So I have a story. I have a take on this I'll share.
Yeah, we'll start with you on what you have to say with Kick the Can.
I watched the Twilight Zone movie earlier this week.
Yeah,
to refresh my memory.
Me too. I mean, obviously, because we're reviewing it.
Because
So,
I had not seen it for several years. And when I say several years, I mean several as in 20 or 30 years I had not seen this movie.
even when, like, say, like, we got a Blu-ray copy of it, like,
I may have watched it then, I don't remember. But
Probably so.
it had been years since I had seen this movie. But I do know this, that when I saw the episode Kick the Can originally, it did not have the same effect on me that it did when I watched it this time. And the reason being is because
yeah,
it's, as I explained to you before, you get to a certain age, and I'm 59. So when you get to a certain age, you begin to realize that the days ahead are fewer than the days behind.
yep,
So at the time when I watched it, I thought, "Oh, that's sweet. These elderly people, they have a chance to kind of relive their youth and everything." But there was just something about it this time. The old lady that was in it,
yeah,
and maybe I think it was Miss Cox. I think that's
Probably
that's,
so.
That's the one they called Miss Cox.
yeah.
She was just a sweet little lady, and she just wanted to go out and play and run.
There's
And
also
just like she did when she was a kid.
the other characters. There's Mr. Mute, Mr. McGee, and
Yep.
Mrs. Dempsey, Mrs. Weinstein,
Right.
and also, yeah, Mr. Leo Conroy. And we, of course, have our main character of the set.
Scatman Crothers.
He plays Mr. Bloom. He's basically Hope in disguised as a human, so...
That's exactly right. And he's
And you know what? Scatman Crothers, he's good in anything, and just always nice to see him on screen.
and I think the term Bloom, Mr. Bloom, comes from, that there's this the old saying, hope blooms eternal. That's kind of an old saying. And so that bloom, where you said that's a very good analogy, he represents hope.
Yeah.
Hope blooms eternal. And these elderly people, he brings them their youth back, gives them a chance to experience youth again, and to be like kids again. And it's something that a lot of elderly people do. Now, I'm also elderly. I walk and I stay pretty active, but
And good shape and so on.
I'm in pretty good shape. So
Yeah. And that's a good thing.
I have energy, but there are days I don't feel very well. And I think, it's just because I'm getting older and I can't bounce back like I used to.
Yeah. And because with Kick the Can being such an emotional segment, well, because the fact that Spielberg directed this segment, and Spielberg is so good at delivering emotion in his movies.
Sure is.
Yeah. Whimsical and magical, and there's emotion sometimes. So, yeah. And, because one of them, who's a bit of a grouch, and,
He just he resists it. He resists the temptation at first of turning young. But then when he sees the one gentleman who stays young,
yeah.
he decides to stay a little boy.
And then
he wants to follow him.
Yeah, he says,
wants
like,
to do it too.
Take me with you.
Yeah, and he can't do it.
Yeah.
He can't take it. And it's really sad. But you also see him at the end of that segment, that episode, you see him out there actually kicking a can.
Yes. Yeah.
So he's actually kind of, the thing of it is, he was not really feeble.
No.
He was not really, he was an older gentleman, but he was still in pretty good shape. But he was making himself to be older than what he really was.
Yep.
You see, he wasn't thinking like a young person. So when this happens, when he sees this change, he decides, you know what, I'm gonna do what I want to do, and I'm gonna live. If I've got the energy to go out there and kick a can, that's what I'm going to do, and that's exactly what he did. And he was happy at the end. He didn't have to be transformed into a child. He realized it on his own.
Yep. And then Mr. Bloom, he goes from one retirement home to another and is going to do the same thing.
Yep.
So.
And you know, is bringing joy and happiness to the people that live there. And you can see when he first walks in, he waves his hand in front of this guy. The guy's just sitting there like this. You know, he's not even paying any attention.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Just completely out of it. So.
Yeah. Yeah. But Kick the Can, you know, what do we have to, what are the final things we have to say on Kick the Can?
Good episode, very heartwarming episode.
Good segment.
Touching, yeah, very touching. It almost brought me to tears.
Yeah.
It didn't quite, but it almost brought me to tears. I definitely had a lump in my throat a couple of times.
Yeah.
Especially watching that elderly woman, that Miss Cox. It was just it was sad because you just saw how she wanted to be young again and she wanted to be able to do. And you think there's older people out there that are probably in that situation, living in a nursing home, living in a retirement home,
yep.
An assisted living facility somewhere, that they would give anything to be young again and to be able to go out and play. It's things that you and I take for granted because we can go out any time and do whatever we want. But there's going to come a time in our life, if we live that long, that we're going to look back and we're going to think, man, I wished I'd done this. I wished I'd done that. I wished I had a chance to do it now, but I don't have the strength to do it now. You see?
Yep, that's true. And, before we get to the next two segments, because, with the Twilight Zone movie, because the first two segments, Time Out and Kick the Can, they were considered not that good. But the last two segments, which we're about to get to, starting with the second to last, the last two segments of the Twilight Zone movie were considered good. Mm-hmm. But I don't know, even as of now, Time Out and Kick the Can, the first two segments of the Twilight Zone movie, I mean, for us, we don't see them we don't think they're that bad.
Oh, no.
No. So, with Kick the Can out of the way, segment 3, It's a Good Life. Again, another Twilight Zone adaptation and...
taken from an episode from the original series. Exactly. Yep. This one was more intense. There was, as special effects change and they become more imaginative, like the sister sitting there with her mouth completely missing.
That was a terrifying moment.
That was creepy. That was really creepy looking.
Yes, it was. I've even seen a clip of it on YouTube with just that and saying the scariest thing from the Twilight Zone movie. That's what was titled, the YouTube video.
Well, I would say that and probably the gremlin, which we'll get into in the next segment.
When we get more into Nightmare 20,000 Feet. But yeah, It's a Good Life because Helen Foley, who's an occupation school teacher, and she doesn't know it yet, but is about to meet a young boy named Anthony, and he has a very unique power. And by the way, Kathleen Quinlan, if I'm saying that last name right,
Kathleen Quinlan,
yeah. I remembered that, and maybe you had forgotten, but I'll remind you, she played Tom Hanks's wife in Apollo 13.
Yes.
Yeah, do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, that's her. So, yeah, so she plays Helen Foley, and basically, I don't know, she's trying to find her destination somewhere.
We don't know really if she's on her way to a new school. Maybe she's on her way to a new school to teach. Whatever it is, they don't really
establish it,
right? But she's there. She comes into this town. She meets this little boy. She goes home with him.
Yeah, gives him a ride back home.
Gives him a ride home.
His bike was run over accidentally.
Yeah, and
then we see the family.
He brings her in to meet the family. Family's acting all strange, they're just
there's Uncle Walt being played by the late Kevin McCarthy.
Yep.
The mother being played by Patricia Barry. The father being played by William
Shallard.
Yeah, Shallard. And Ethel being played by Nancy Cartwright, who years later would go on to be the voice of Bart Simpson. So
yeah, exactly.
That's right. So
neat little trivia thrown in there.
It's true. So yeah, they're acting strange and just all happy and such, and
it's a false happiness. It's a put on. You can tell it's a put up job because they're actually walking on eggshells because of this little boy. They're terrified of this little boy because of his power.
And by the way, two other cast members that are in It's a Good Life. And by the way, It's a Good Life being directed by Joe Dante. And a year after the Twilight Zone movie, he would go on to direct Gremlins. And one cast member who would go on to work with Joe Dante again in Gremlins is character actor Dick Miller. He like works at the cafe and helping out Helen Foley. And I didn't realize until now that I'm looking at it, Bill
Mummy.
Yeah, he makes a cameo, and the fact that he played the little boy in It's a Good Life.
Yes, in the original series.
So it's nice to see that he makes a cameo in this.
Yes.
And do you remember that there was one of the later TV adaptations of the Twilight Zone? Like this one was in the early 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
He came back, he reprised the role, and his daughter played his daughter, she played his daughter in the episode, and the daughter has the power too. So that's pretty cool. A sequel to an episode of to It's a Good Life. So again, Bill Mummy, because he makes a cameo in It's a Good Life, so that was pretty cool. And in the house, because again, Anthony's family just acting all strange, and they're just so desperate to just get out of there.
They are.
They're terrified of Anthony.
They're desperate to do anything for him because he's so he manipulates everything. He can do anything, and he thinks they don't like him, but they're trying to they're doing everything they can to convince him that they do like him. They do like him because they're scared to death of what he'll do to retaliate against him.
They do like him, or because...
Well, no, they're scared. They're scared to death of it.
Well, I mean, yeah, but okay.
And they're desperate to get out of there, but they can't. They're afraid to leave.
Yeah,
because they're afraid of what he'll do to them.
And basically, like with It's a Good Life, because with I don't think in the episode like he was called Anthony, like different name for the little boy. But one thing is that in It's a Good Life, like the boy would always have his family watch the same programs that he likes to watch.
Cartoons, always cartoons.
In the original episode, it was all dinosaur stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But in this, it's cartoons, and it's a lot of Looney Tunes cartoons. Like one of the Looney Tunes shorts with the kitten and Mark Anthony is in there.
He traps one of the girls in.
It's Ethel. Yeah, Ethel gets inside of the TV and is getting chased and terrorized by cartoons, and then at one point gets eaten by a cartoon.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So we have to figure that's the end of Ethel.
Yeah, and even one moment where Uncle Walt performs a magic trick, pulling a rabbit out of the hat, and then at one moment, scary rabbit, pops out. Oh yeah,
comes out. It's really scary.
Yeah.
It looks like a nightmare from Roger Rabbit. I mean, it really does.
Yeah. And there's one moment where a cartoon-like character comes out of the TV.
Yeah.
Which spins around like the Tasmanian Devil.
Is exactly, and is also kind of scary looking,
Yeah.
Creepy looking anyway, so.
Even showing the teeth and the eyes.
Oh yeah. It was definitely, very well done.
And then the ending to it. What do we have to say about the ending?
It was weird because
Helen Foley
took Anthony with her.
And Helen Foley apparently kind of has the ability to get Anthony to stop or just to control it.
And I really think that her dark side came out, and she decided that she would take Anthony, and she knew she could manipulate him, and could influence him, and that she might be able to influence him in a way that would benefit her. Yeah, that's what I think.
And thus,
I think she had ulterior motives. That was my takeaway from that.
And thus, Anthony then is with Helen, and they drive off.
Yeah, and you notice as they're driving that flowers bloom as they're driving. Do you remember that along the road? Yeah.
So there's a happy ending there.
Sort of, but kind of a twisted happy ending.
Yeah.
You're just like, oh, what is she up to? She's up to something. She is up to something,
and we never see what happened. Yeah. What happens next?
She is up to no good.
And then so It's a Good Life. Like, how do you feel about it now? Because
it had the same effect on me as it did then. It's a very it's a story. I call it an isolationist story. Because you're isolated. You're isolated from the outside world.
Yep.
It's like example off the top of my head. I can't remember the name of the episode from Star Trek: The Next Generation when Beverly Crusher gets caught in the warp bubble, and everybody starts disappearing.
I know what you're talking about
on the ship, and it's actually her that's trapped, and it's not.
I know what episode you're talking about. I can't remember the name of it.
She's not in reality.
In season 4.
it's in those types of stories where I call them isolationist stories, where you're isolated from help. You're on your own. You're having to survive on your own.
Yeah,
and you can't get help.
No.
So that was my one draw to that story. Sometimes those they're really, they just wear you out to watch them. I mean, they just wear you out emotionally because you're just like, oh my gosh, when are they going to get out of this?
Yeah.
But you love it because it's just you're drawn to it because I think it's everybody's nightmare to be in a helpless situation.
Absolutely.
And that's what those are.
Yep. All right. So with It's a Good Life out of the way, the fourth and final segment. Even though we talked, we started off talking about this, but we're still going to talk about it. Nightmare at 20,000 Feet.
Yeah, the thing that popped out of me at first was that they were. It was at a time when you could still smoke on an airline flight.
Yeah,
and I do remember that when you could smoke on an airline flight. If you look at some of the older planes today, when you fly on them, some of the older airliners, you can see where the ashtray used to be in the armrest because there was an ashtray in the armrest. Mm-hmm. You just pop it open and you put out your cigarette or your cigar in that. Put your ashes there. Mm-hmm. And people smoked on planes.
Yeah. And so, with the main character of Nightmare of 20,000 Feet, Mr. John Valentine, and in the original episode, he was called Mr. Robert Wilson. Mm-hmm. And of course, William Shatner playing Mr. Robert Wilson. And fun fact, Shatner was considered to
reprise the role.
Yeah, but I think if I remember correctly, it was due to scheduling conflicts.
Probably so.
And thus, John Lithgow was cast.
He was either doing T.J. Hooker or he was doing a Star Trek movie. One of the two.
Yeah, probably. And pretty much probably at that time, when he was doing T.J. Hooker, he was doing the Star Trek movies. So.
He would have been good to reprise it. He would have done just as excellent, if not a more excellent job in this one. So it would have been interesting to see that.
And if he was in the Twilight Zone movie, probably would have brought a different performance.
And John Lithgow, of anyone they could have cast, he was probably the best.
Perfect.
John Lithgow is an excellent actor. I remember watching him on Third Rock from the Sun.
Yes.
Which was a great series.
Other movies that I can think of, Harry and the Hendersons.
Oh, absolutely.
And if you had forgotten at one point, he was the voice of Lord Farquaad in Shrek.
Yes.
Yep, there's that.
Yes, he's an outstanding actor.
Absolutely.
He was enough over the top in this to pull it off the way Shatner did.
He was terrified on being on a plane, especially in a storm.
Exactly.
And then it got more worse when he saw the gremlin out there.
It got a lot worse for him when he saw that gremlin out there. And he didn't bring to me the level of paranoia to the character that Shatner did. Shatner was just almost, he was just, he was near hysterics.
Yeah.
Lithgow was a little more controlled. He was, and maybe it was a little more realistic because he was a little more in control, not completely. He was almost unhinged, but not to the point that Shatner's character was in the original episode.
Yeah, and not just John Valentine in Nightmare 20,000 Feet. The passengers on the plane, very interesting group of people, I should say.
They were
if you get what I'm trying to say,
they didn't go into a lot of that. Of course, there wasn't a lot of time to go into a lot of character development on each of those. You saw the little girl. The little girl was shaming him for smoking. And then the guy sitting in front of him, turned out to be a
Sky Marshall,
a Sky Marshal,
played by the late Charles Knapp.
Yeah, gave him a dirty look, and then
because of smoking.
Right, he puts the cigarette out because the captain has said we're heading into heavy turbulence. Please extinguish all cigarettes.
And some of the there's the co-pilot and two stewardesses. And by the way,
I like the interaction with the co-pilot and John Lithgow's character because he was,
at least everything went well between them. So.
Yeah, he was, but the co-pilot was really trying to calm him down, really trying to bring him under control. Mm-hmm.
And by the way, the junior stewardess, that's Donna Dixon. That's Dan Aykroyd's wife. Did you forget about that or?
Yes, and here's an interesting story.
And actually, the same year that this movie came out, they got married. So
Donna Dixon used to date Paul Stanley of Kiss.
Oh, did he?
And-
This is before she was with Dan Aykroyd. So.
And she and Paul Stanley broke up, and she started going out with Dan Aykroyd, which I was kind of scratching my head over that one, but
I actually did not know that she used to date Paul Stanley.
She did. She dated Paul Stanley.
Now I know, especially and as we're recording this.
Yeah, they were an item for some time.
Yeah. And by the way, it was a passenger, I think, in the plane that who makes a cameo in Nightmare 20,000 Feet? Rod Serling's wife. She made a cameo in the fourth and final segment. And by the way, the fourth and final segment, Nightmare 20,000 Feet, being directed by George Miller. And of course, George Miller, best known for directing Mad Max and that animated film called the Oscar-winning animated film Happy Feet. You know, the penguins.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you remember that?
I do remember that.
So there's that. And so George Miller, he directed this. I forget, did Mad Max come before the Twilight Zone movie? Was it in the 70s?
Yes.
Late 70s?
Yes, the first one did. Yeah.
With Mel Gibson, yeah.
With Mel Gibson.
Yes. Now I remember, and thank you, because, Mad Max came before the Twilight Zone movie, so already George Miller was an acclaimed director because of that.
And I'm pretty sure that was when Mel Gibson got his American debut as an actor, because he's Australian. And
even though I've not heard him with an Australian accent, I don't know.
Yeah, he is Australian. Mel Gibson is. He may have lost a lot of that strong Aussie accent.
I feel like it.
But he was Australian, and you hear that Australian accent in those movies. Kind of a side,
in a different way,
kind of a sidebar here to this. Kind of I guess you call it kind of a trivia, bit of trivia. Is that Mel Gibson's dad actually lives, or did live? He may still live there in Beckley, about 50 miles up the road from us.
Okay.
Mel Gibson's father lives in Beckley, yeah.
Right. All right, so back to Nightmare 20,000 Feet, because, so much that happens on the plane, and I tell you, the storm is intense, Yeah,
it is intense. It's scary.
And to top it off, what the Gremlins doing. So.
Exactly. It looks like they're flying on a 707. It's got two engine pods on it, and at that time, that size, that was the only other plane that had two engine pods was a 707.
And of course, one terrifying moment, and just like of course they had to do it in this, just like what happened in the original, where the main character, from Robert Wilson to John Valentine, at one point opening the window, and the gremlin is right there, at his face right at the window.
Yeah, much different face than the original. Although the original, you are taken aback when you watch it.
Even by the music.
Exactly.
And even in this, because, John Valentine's screaming, and then there's, one quick shot where, his eyes kind of pop. Do you know what I'm talking about? Did you catch that?
Yeah, I did.
A glimpse of that? Okay.
Yeah.
And then, again, because the co-pilot calming him down, and, of course, things are getting more worse with the storm and what John is seeing out there with the gremlin, literally just destroying it. It catches fire, and then... Even at one point, he took the camera from the little girl trying to get a picture. That didn't work. And then, because he's seen how much damage the gremlin is doing, he's just screw this. I'm gonna do what's right. And grabs one of those what were those again?
Fire extinguisher.
Yeah, breaking it, and then goes for the Sky Marshal's gun.
Which is exactly what happened in the original episode.
But that was different a little bit.
It was a little different.
He snuck and stole a gun, and then he
did. But this the premise was the same. He got the Sky Marshal's gun. He fired through the window trying to kill it. But this is why they used a 707. It's because there's 4 engine pods, 2 on either wing. And so they had to have enough engines to where that gremlin was tearing up that one, that it wouldn't drop out and there would only be 1 engine left.
Oh, yeah.
Because you remember the co-pilot comes out, he says, we still have 3. And he says, and he actually tells him, he says, yes, we did lose the outboard engine on the port side. He said, but we still have 3 engines. He's telling him, he said, we can safely land this plane.
The gremlin did destroy the first one.
Yes, the one that
even though they don't know that yet. I mean, at least until at the very end.
The outboard engine on the port side of the plane, where the port is left, starboard is right. So on the port side of the plane, the outboard engine, the farthest out, is the one he destroyed.
Yeah.
And so...
And with John Valentine trying to shoot the gremlin, and as we explained earlier, grabbing him by the face, and I think the gremlin destroyed the gun in his hand.
He did, but you also
kind of bite on it or
You also
something.
remember, the gremlin had no doubt been busy, because you see John Lithgow, he's reading a newspaper headline or something, and he sees where another plane had crashed and 145 lives lost on the plane. So you got to figure
clearly
that this gremlin has been making its rounds in the air, landing on planes and destroying them. Which, if you understand, that's an old wives' tale, that gremlins are considered demons that would sabotage planes.
Even Looney Tunes did their take on that.
Yeah,
because of there was a Bugs Bunny short.
So if there was a engine trouble in a plane, the pilot would blame it on the gremlins.
Yeah,
and say it was the gremlins causing it.
Exactly. Yeah. And the fact that there would be like films or whatever that would actually do that. Well, I mean, like say Looney Tunes did that, and Twilight Zone, two best well-known like materials, that have done their take on gremlins messing up things. So.
Right. But the gremlin in that movie was so cool. I mean, it was just so cool. There's a picture of it here somewhere that you had.
We just saw it, but I'm at the cast,
Oh, you're at the cast. Okay. So, but it was so cool that it was scary cool. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
It's not actually in that segment because that's the cast. I don't think the creature
creature. That's what and the creature was played by
Larry Cedar.
The body performance, of course, in the suit,
which was amazing. Because when you look at that, you think, now you would look at it and you think, oh, that's CGI. No, there was no CGI back in the early 80s.
No, there was a lot of practical stuff.
Exactly.
CG had just barely begun. The best example, the Genesis effect in Wrath of Khan. So that was CG by ILM.
But it looked much more computer generated than it does now.
Yeah.
Now it looks realistic.
Mm-hmm.
Then it didn't. It looked like it was generated by a computer. They could never have pulled that off in this movie ever.
Right. So after the gremlin escapes, then after the plane lands and John Valentine is sent to the hospital, and then they get to see the damage on the plane,
Much like they did in the original episode.
Yeah.
And they realized something happened,
And John Valentine, I don't know, must have then realized that maybe John wasn't going crazy,
Yeah. And then when he's in the ambulance.
Yep, Dan Aykroyd appears once again, but he's the ambulance driver.
So you had some problems up there, and the guy was like, "Oh,
yeah, you had a real scare up there."
Yeah, real scare. That's how he put it.
How about some music? And we hear Midnight Special again.
Here it goes again. And then,
you had a real scare up there. Did you And he's like, "Oh yeah," and then want to see something really scary?
Yep.
We don't see what happens.
We don't see what happens, but we know what happens.
But I mean, we get this look on John Valentine's face.
It's there's, the assumption is there. You know what's coming.
Yeah.
You just don't see it.
And I like how we actually hear Rod Serling's voice before the credits roll.
Exactly.
Yep. And also, another thing, the music in this movie was good, right? Don't you think?
Yeah, the music was very spot on.
Jerry Goldsmith.
Great composer.
He was one of those. He was definitely one of the top best composers, right next to Williams.
Yep.
So
I would say that. I would agree with that.
He had done a lot, good examples from Jerry Goldsmith, Star Trek, Gremlins. I could go on. So, yeah, but yeah. So with the fourth and final segment, Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, it was good. Definitely one of the best segments in the Twilight Zone movie.
I agree.
Again, it's that and. It's a Good Life that a lot of people consider the two best segments of the film. Not much on the first two, Time Out and Kick the Can. But again, as we said, we don't think that the first two segments are that bad. And I'm sure, though, that there are some people that think that all four segments, including the first two, are good. So, but overall, the Twilight Zone movie is a very mixed bag. So
it is. The first two segments are much more... They're much more thoughtful. They make you think.
Yeah.
It's more of a cerebral type theme. It gets you to thinking because the first one, the Time Out, it addresses racism and how ugly it is.
Yep.
And it shows what happens to this guy when he becomes so racist.
Exactly.
He's the hatred in his heart. He gets to see what hatred really is.
Exactly.
And then, the next segment, Kick the Can, is when you get to see. It makes you think because you realize if you're an older person like I am,
Yeah.
from the time I watched it before, when you're an older person and you watch it, you say, hey, you know what? I'm getting older, and this is going to be me someday. And and the times that I'm sitting at home watching TV that I could be out doing something, I'm going to wish that I had the energy and the strength to get out to do something when I could have done it when I was younger.
Yep. And, okay, so there's that, and It's a Good Life, and Nightmare at 20,000 Feet.
Yep.
Any last things to say on those?
Great stories. It was a great movie overall.
Yep.
Great, it held the Twilight Zone theme.
It did its very best.
Very well. It remained sacred to the Twilight Zone.
And yeah, even though, because again, the Twilight Zone movie is a very mixed bag. I think for some of us, like how we feel about the movie, it did its very best.
It did,
trying to stay true to the Twilight Zone.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, hey, along with the other TV adaptations of the Twilight Zone and with the movie, they'll never top off the original Twilight Zone.
No.
Never.
No.
So,
nothing's ever going to top that.
Yeah. So again, final results on the Twilight Zone movie?
I give it, out of 10, I give it 9.5.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give it, let me see. I'll give it,
you go 1 to 5 stars, if I recall.
10 out of 10, 1 to 10.
Yeah.
So 7 out of 10. I give it 7 out of 10 stars.
I give it 9.5. The only reason I don't give it as 10 is because it's duplicating stories from the Twilight Zone. Yeah. But it does a very good job when it does it.
Yep.
But it's not an original.
No.
But it's kind of a new spin on an original
only the
story.
First segment is an original.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, you give it 9 out of half stars.
I give it a 9.5 out of 10.
And for me, I give it 7 out of 10 stars. So again, we think the Twilight Zone is not that bad.
Oh, no, it's very good.
It is very good.
Very well done.
There are those like us that enjoy it, but there are those that would be how they feel about it. Just it's true. Again, this being a very mixed bag. So, but what about you guys? What do you think of the Twilight Zone movie itself? What did you think of our review? Leave comments and give this review video a like, as always. So, any last words?
I must be off.
He says that for me. We hope you've enjoyed our review of Twilight Zone, the movie. More review videos are on the way. They're going to be awesome. Keep looking forward. And we'll see you guys in the next video/review. And of course, continuing on reviewing Halloweenish films on the weekdays. Stay tuned for the next two later this week. Take care, and peace out.